Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the place where we are creating a community discussion around different topics: magic, woo woo, mental health, wellness, holistic, also allopathic. Even though we're not doctors, we'll talk about it because we have opinions. And we're here to share with you guys, and you're here to share with us, hopefully. So if you are viewing this on Facebook, you're gonna need to click on the broadcast so we can see your comments. And then if you're on YouTube, just like Deb's here, hi Debs. All you have to do is comment and we will see those. We'll try to throw them on the screen so we can all share and have thoughts about what we're creating in this moment. And speaking of creation, we are talking about an interesting topic. I think this is like one of those topics that is akin to which way do you flip the toilet paper roll in your bathroom? There is no real consensus on it. And, but this is a deeper topic than that because we are not shallow people. Anyway, the topic is baseline human goodness. Does it exist? And so that is the question. Does it exist? And we are going to dive in here. We'd love to hear what you all believe about basic baseline human goodness and what your experiences have been with that. And before we get too deep into that concept, we have introductions to do. So I'm gonna let Katrina go first on the introductions. I know I always surprise you with this because I think I need to like clear my throat because I'm jumbling my words here.
Wow. Okay, then. I'm Katrina Raspold. I'm co-owner of Crossroads Occult, where we offer our handmade magical items and also magical services like readings, cleansings, and spell work, personal spell work that I do for people. I'm also a published author of more than 40 books, and I am the editor of the Green Egg magazine at thegreeneggmagazine.com.
Very cool. I am Dahlia Rose. I'm the founder of the Conduit School and a natural creative in all things spiritual. So I also do readings, healings, create magical items. That's more recent. And well, I do a lot of things, but I do them because I hope to change how we interact with energy, interact with our own healing processes. And I hope that we can expand together and grow and be more amazing and embodied than we ever thought possible. So we can really see some change in this crazy world, which is right on par with our question as far as the possibility of human goodness. I do think there is a level of goodness required for positive change in the world, and the question is, do we come into this space with it, into this onto this earth with it? So Katrina, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I'll address a couple of things. First of all, I have to go with the elephant in the room, and that is that I'm significantly older than you are. And so when I was your age, I did believe in a baseline goodness in people. I believe that there was an unmistakable um, conscience, and that conscience spoke to a certain mode of behavior in people and encouraged them toward that particular outcome. I also want to address the toilet paper issue. Um, so my husband, I'm a waterfall. My husband is a mullet. Okay, and um, I cannot pee in his bathroom because he's wrong. And they've actually found diagrams by the person who invented toilet paper that shows that I'm right. And I literally bought him a vertical toilet paper holder so that I cannot see his wrongness, so that I can pee in his bathroom. Now,
Delightful.
that's part of what convinced me in a baseline evil in people, but not necessarily a baseline good. So that's my position. I'm going to stick to it. Now, I really did. And all of my husbands considered me to be very Pollyanna, I always saw the goodness in people.
Oh,
That was, it didn't matter. I could convince anybody that anybody was underneath it all a good person. And then I just got burned so many times that I swung the other direction with an underlying sense of everyone is given to the negative behaviors under certain situations. And now I've kind of stabilized in the center with a statement that I actually heard from the behavior panel on YouTube, which is one of my favorite sets of guys. I love these guys. I'd hit any one of the four. They're wonderful. And they say the organism does what helps the organism to survive. And I think that our perception of what is good has to evolve according to what is happening in our culture and our society. There are certain ethnicities that other ethnicities believe are inherently bad. They're
right.
bad just because of their ethnicity. We're having wars right now because of that. And, there's been genocide because of that, because they're bad. There have definitely been plenty of times that we know people have done what would be considered inherently bad things like stealing or killing, but they did it for altruistic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's good and what's bad there? When does it tip over from this this is no longer good, this is now bad or neutral because there are these mitigating circumstances. So because I'm tired, I don't have the gears to turn to find out what that is. And like we were talking about in pre-show, when we look at the idea of a baseline, we're talking about an understood continuum of normalcy, if you want to call it that, or an understood constancy, and then we have variations from that constancy. So baseline heart rate, if your heart rate is usually this amount, 120, pick one, that's pretty high, but that becomes your baseline. And then if you dip far below it or far above it, that's no longer baseline, that's an abnormality. So if we have a baseline of goodness, this means that in humanity, there is a current of goodness that defies law, that defies history, that defies subjectivity, and that any aberration from that then becomes not good or varying degrees of not good.
Mm.
And for that, we have to have that baseline. So where do we find that baseline? Who is that baseline that says, okay, this is what is normally good? Because if we go country to country, if we go ethnic group to ethnic group, if we go church to church, we will have varying degrees of goodness that another group is going to say, oh, you have got to be kidding me. That is pure evil.
Right.
So how does that work? And that then becomes my, I guess, brush hog for trying to get through this topic and create a path to the other side of, so what is that? What does that look like? And how do we find that? And where does that come from?
Mm. Yeah. So to piggyback on your religious comment, that's exactly where my mind went as you were going through your explanation. This is what religions attempt to create. So there is some story about, an individual who's found and does things or is believed to be great, and not just religions, but cults, right? And then we are to emulate that individual as the baseline of goodness or whatever it is that's being trying to be achieved. And with your quote earlier of the species or the individual will do whatever is necessary to survive, um, I believe that falls under that umbrella as well. We survive better in community spaces. And so if you, there's like this thing that comes forward, I think that is natural to human beings, it's natural to animals actually, where you start to sort of mirror what you see in front of you and deem working, so to speak. And so that just, it really is a deep rabbit hole, because there's no ability to declare good or bad, except circumstantially. And even then, I find myself often saying, yes, that is inherently wrong. And there is this other note here that says it had a positive impact. Positive being that there was a benefit of some kind to large people, a large amount of people, or one individual.
Yes. And we can look at the fact that there are a lot of people in prison that, if, let's say, all right, let's pick a jury of 12 of us, all got together and interviewed and read the circumstances of that person's incarceration or even that person's execution. Would we agree, or would we have, I wouldn't even say empathy, but understanding to the point that, what, that was justified? I kind of, in a way, go back on behavior to the idea of hoodoo. Is it justified or is it not justified?
Right.
And different people are going to have different opinions on that. And we would look for a litmus or a guide. What can we look at to create that baseline? And we can't look at the law, because any of us can find, without even thinking about it, a dozen laws that we feel are utterly unfair,
Right.
and that they're not good, and that prosecuting under those laws is not good. So the law is off the table. We can't do that. We can't, a lot of people would then say, okay, well, little children, they are the best representation of what is inherent in people.
Mm-hmm.
So if we had little children and we gauge according to their behavior, would we find a baseline of good or not good? I won't even say evil, just not good. And the answer is no, because number one, children don't have the reasoning faculties that we have, which some people would say makes them a better example. But reasoning is important in adults, and it does come into play. Cognitive understanding of the outcome of our behaviors isn't something kids really have. They're just not good at that.
Right.
But also, children are conditioned by their environment from the minute they're born.
Right.
And that even comes down to literally the minute that they're born, whether they are having nurturing time with mom and bonding time with parents, or if they're pushed away into a NIC unit and worked on extensively to get them breathing, to keep them alive. We see behavioral differences and emotional differences in those kids that have a different immediate experience after birth.
Well, even
And
in utero as well, wouldn't you say? The
what?
development of, even in utero, wouldn't you say,
Oh,
like, even the
to some
development of
degree,
the brain?
sure.
Yeah.
So kids are not a good gauge. Kids are a really stupid gauge to use, actually. Um, we can't by any means choose history, because, I mean, when we look at the idea of cancel culture, we look at how we now judge things that were perfectly normal 50 years ago as being not good. We pretty much look at all of history in the history of everywhere, and can pick out very few things that seem altruistic or seem good, or what we would call good. Um, it's all mostly very bad. It's all
Right.
mostly people uh, seeking the acquisition of wealth and power and dominance. And that drives almost every historical happening ever. So that's a tough one to use. So we can't use religion, because even the religions we're in, when we get out of them and look back at them, we can see the errors, we can see the problems, we can see the not goodness. So religion doesn't work either. So
Chipping
I
away at
don't
the list.
I don't have an answer. Um, to me, goodness is something that's very subjective and very fluid depending on our circumstances and depending on, like you were saying, we mirror what's there. And that keeps us in some ways from ever being our authentic self. We
Yeah.
mirror what's there to fit in, we mirror what's there to be accepted. And so, and I'll tell you where we can really see this. This is big. And it really disappointed me regarding human nature. I think this is where a lot of my cynicism came into play, actually, Dahlia, is we can look at the time, and I won't specify any particular person, but we can say in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years, that people have become meaner to each other
Absolutely.
and just all around shittier kind of behavior. And that is because they were given permission by people they admire to mirror that behavior. Whereas before, what was around them discouraged that behavior and said, you know what? No, we're not going to let you say those things about women. We're not going to let you say those things about certain ethnicities. We're not going to let you say those things about certain class groups. We're not even going to let you say those things about certain political party members. We're not going to do that. And so those behaviors became quelled because there wasn't a place to mirror them. But once that was all over YouTube and all over the news and everywhere, there
And there
was,
were no repercussions.
right, without repercussions, suddenly we had permission to be our absolute shittiest selves and to pull down into the bottom sludge of our behavior and just vomit that up.
Mm.
And so it became okay to be a jerk and an asshole. It became the standard. And so now a lot of us who are empathetic or empathic don't even want to go outside, don't want to turn on the news, don't want to open up our social media feeds because it is so virulent.
Yeah.
So, but if you talk to those people, they don't feel that way at all. They feel completely vindicated. They feel like this is goodness. This is what's supposed to happen. So that's absolutely my, my soapbox. I was a Christian for many, many years, and I would have told you that the people I went to church with were the goodest people there were. I mean, just good folk, good people. I look back at those folks now, and they were horrible people. They were bigots. They were gossips. You know, they were absolutely marginalizing of people that did not fit into their little moral bucket. Othering, and that those are not any. I wouldn't want to hang out with any of them now.
Yeah.
So even within our own beliefs, we often, like I was saying, look back and think those. I would not think of that as a baseline of good.
There are what I love is that there are belief systems when I consider like different tribal spaces and like indigenous cultures, or even like going over to one of the cultures that I think is probably most inviting is Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a culture, a belief system. um, they're always like, well, if you're curious, come in. For the most part, I mean, they keep some things sacred, but there is this, like, you don't have to buckle down and believe what I believe, but we can share in this harmonious moment together. And that is something that I've always appreciated. So I guess for me and all of this, one thing that I think you touched on, the altruism, that's a good barometer for baseline goodness if that can be built into who you are as a person, and that flexibility is allowed. I had this discussion the other day with someone where if I went into someone's home, if I went into someone's church, I am going to adhere to whatever they have going on out of respect. But in the same sentence, I would expect that if they come to my space, that the same level of respect would be offered. And I'm not necessarily saying you have to give to get, but I would not allow them to come into my space and be like, well, you were willing to say cover your head in my church, or you were willing to um, take your shoes off in my house. So I expect you to now adopt that as policy. To me, that's a level of altruism. It's like, I'm going to consider you, how you feel in your presence. Now, if we're in a neutral space, I can't necessarily see accommodations being made for one person. I think in that point, when I look at baseline goodness, I'm looking and using altruism as a variable. Um, I'm looking at private space, I'll adhere to you. My private space, I will adhere to me. And then in public space, we get to embody our own principles and belief systems and sit side by side as a level of flexibility. So I don't believe that that can be engineered in a human being, although some parts of me want to argue like brain chemicals being a factor in that. But I know that as human beings, there have been many studies where if a baby is not exposed to other human beings at birth and is nurtured in that way, they die.
Yeah.
Not even if you give them food, they're not going to make it. And so there's literally like no way to engineer this small human at a baseline. I then want to lean into this place of, I've been on this journey of 10%, trying to find 10% better of something, or 10% of something I can deal with. And so when I come to this baseline goodness conversation, I'm attempting to like, okay, well, where's my 10%? And maybe that is for me the flexibility of things and how we should change. This is why we can't rely on our laws. This is why we can't rely on most religious things, is that there's not a level of flexibility available. But if we are allowed to change our baseline 10% as we grow, as we recognize, hey, this is no longer working for me, not from a place of inconvenience, but there is a genuine internal resistance to say something is not right. And I need to sit and evaluate that and then make those 10% changes, we would actually see a remarkable change in the world. So that's maybe that's Pollyanna, but that's my like, we can do it. We can figure this out.
Well, you know what? I struggle with the concept of altruism.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that we both have the same definition. To me, altruism is a selfless position of helping others without expectation of return.
Yes.
Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. I think that there are people who are very willing to take advantage of that in a negative way. And I think that a lot of times altruism is not sustainable. Okay. Because people who are naturally altruistic or who have been raised to be altruistic burn out so quickly from those who overindulge in that altruism. And for balance, and nature abhors a vacuum, you have to be getting something back for what you're giving. And otherwise that vacuum will create, and you can't fill it all with knitting and mindful prayer. There even Mother Teresa, who is seen as one of the most altruistic people ever, wrote letters of extreme distress to the church, saying, I can't do this anymore. I've lost my faith, but I've lost trust with the higher up. I've lost trust with my the people, just further up the line. And I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, she was very unhappy at the end of her life after giving and giving and giving. There's a curandero called oh God, I can't remember, Feliciano something. Why am I losing this? But he literally died from healing and healing and healing and healing. Nino Feliciano, I think was his name. The boy, Feliciano. But he was said to even perform miracles after his death, which is why he was canonized, because the place where he died grew a tree, and people could supposedly go to the tree and be healed. It's like, you won't even let this guy die. He's working after he's dead. And it feels like that sometimes, if we were to say, okay, in the nature of altruism, because we believe in baseline goodness, we're going to offer all of our services at no cost. And you're going to get the same exact treatment. You're going to get our full attention. We're going to imbue you with health and goodness and love. That would be a very altruistic thing to do.
Right.
And one of my mentors actually said, when I questioned the fact that he was a Hispanic man teaching me a Hispanic cultural practice, when I am the whitest human on earth, as far as my genetics, he said, I don't care. I don't care about your ethnicity, because I'm raising an army of healers. And that was his vision, was there would be all this army of healers out there healing people, imbuing them with this good, positive energy, taking away their curses, taking away their pain, healing their trauma, so that everybody can elevate to that next level. But what does that look like? Where is he now? I mean, 2004, he left the country. I don't know what happened to him.
Oh, wow.
So, no, not 2004. I'm sorry, 2020. 2020, he left. No, back up. When was it? 2016? Was that when everything started going to shit? When everything started going to shit was when he left. I'm sorry. It's been a long day already. But yeah, he booked. He's like, see ya. I'm out. I see where this is going. So where does altruism become an avenue for usury, and how do you offset that and maintain your own line of goodness without becoming embittered, not because you expected something back, but because your spirit cried out for that balance?
First, I want to say Mother Teresa was a Virgo. Just wanted to throw that in there. And when I consider your question, to me, it becomes a necessary. It has to be an experience where you get breaks. I mean, there can't like you said, not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I because I'm always like, William, did I use that word wrong? I googled altruism, and it semantically it was disinterest in benefit. And I was like, okay, so if you go into it and you're not necessarily interested in the benefit of what you're doing, technically you're altruistic. But anyway, I'm tangenting. I think the only way to do this is to have like recovery periods. At least that would be my solution if I was offering this as advice or tapping into it myself, which I know I've needed breaks. I mean, having a shop open for 5 years damaged my liver, and I had no idea. And had to get treatment for months in order to find balance again. And so all of that said, giving, right? Like as a business owner, I did receive benefit, and I on a conscious level, I was like, no, I'm going to be altruistic about this, give to the people, and did not give back to myself. So like the only thing I can come to is this need for a break that isn't death, and doesn't wait for death. Because clearly people will call on you as you're on the other plane.
So I would even posit that no one is altruistic
Interesting.
because an organism, and we are all human organisms,
Hmm.
we don't do anything without an attachment to the outcome.
Fair.
Nothing. There is nothing we do without an attachment to some specific outcome. Whether that, let's look at Habitat for Humanity, potentially one of the most altruistic organizations there is. They have an attachment to an outcome. They want, number one, to get funding. Number two, they want to provide houses for people. That's an outcome. They want to feel a particular way when that person gets that house.
True.
So there are outcomes attached to even the most altruistic behaviors. It's whether or not those outcomes benefit you. And it's a trick question because if one of your outcomes is you want to feel a particular way
Ooh.
about what you did to create an outcome for someone else, you have then established a benefit to yourself.
There's the Ouroboros.
The Ouroboros, yes.
Ouroboros.
So really that's a tough one because even the most altruistic people want something. They want to feel some kind of way for what they did, whether that's to offset guilt from previous things they did wrong, or they were just born this fucking giving tree or something like that, there's a way that there's something they're looking for. And I'm not just trying to be absolutely jaded.
No,
But
it's okay.
everybody has an investment in the outcome.
This is true. On a funny side note, I saw a more realistic rewrite to the Giving Tree. It was quite funny, where she starts to retaliate for all the asking. So you're right, 100%. And so going back into that baseline of human goodness, I think that I think at our baseline, I believe we are selfish creatures and self-centered. And so I guess the answer to the question is no, but we can learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully we don't burn out on what we learned.
Right? So when we look at people who are givers, let's call them just givers. Mm-hmm. Parents ideally do to some degree fall into this role so that they are providing sustenance and affection and guidance for their kids as they're growing up. And sometimes even after they're grown, they still need support. So that we'll just kind of figure that needs to happen for a person to survive and integrate in a healthy way into society. So we'll take that off the table a little bit. But one of the things, and I think I mentioned this in a prior broadcast, one of the things that has been coming up for me a lot lately with the people that I am doing readings for and doing spell work for, and I'm going to be straight out there and say that it is most often women that are showing me this experience. They begin a relationship as nurturers and caregivers and sort of try to become all things to this person that they're wanting to connect with romantically. And then once they have that connection, or as they're still trying to get that connection, they get resentful that they are a provider of that feeling to that person. So they start off with, oh, no, let me do that for you. No. You don't have to do that. I'll cook. No, I love to cook. I love to provide for you. No, look, I've got your favorite wine right here ready for you. No. I just want you to come over and just relax. I'm going to be your soft place to fall. I'm going to be the easy one for you. But then what happens, and maybe that person, and here's what happens a lot, that person is even saying directly, I am not looking for a committed relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I do not want that in my life.
Right.
And the person is thinking, if I can just show them that I can be all things to them, they're going to change their mind. So then they get resentful that the person doesn't still, a year and a half later, 15 years later, doesn't want a committed relationship. And they get resentful when this person begins to expect that their partner is going to fulfill the things that they promised and the things they set up. So they set up a dynamic, and now they're mad about the dynamic.
Yep.
And they come to me to do spell work to get the other person to change how they're feeling, when the other person was upfront from the beginning about what they wanted and what they felt and what they needed in a connection with them. So I think that, yeah, people that appear very altruistic, they have underlying motives a lot of the time. There was a lady in our pagan community. Oh my gosh, this woman was a virus. I kid you not. And she is well renowned amongst the entire community of hundreds and hundreds of, I would say thousands of people know about this, that she would target a business owner, a metaphysical business owner, or someone who's running a festival, or someone who's a mover and a shaker, basically. She would come in and very astutely, she was good at this, identify what that person needs most. I need marketing help. I need ideas. I need somebody to do the physical labor. I need a location. I need this. And she would begin to just supply that in abundance. She just became the answer to everybody's prayers.
Wow.
And then she just screwed him over in the best way she possibly could. And I mean hard. And she did that serially.
Oh my God.
From person to person to person. And so we should always look deeply into those things that appear too good to be true. Not that you have to be critical of the people that are good to you. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying if somebody is really working exceptionally hard to provide everything you need, consider why that is.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that is healthy or not.
One of the things about, I mean, like, I hate this word so much. Hopefully we bury it a little bit. But narcissism, right? One of the symptoms of that, one of the things that manifests is isolating you. And I recall a situation where I was dating a person and they were that like provider. They bought me clothes. They, all of these things. And they wanted me to move in. And at the time I only had Anthony. And so they were like, yeah, just bring him, move in the house. It'll be fine. And I had this moment where I started to realize like, what would that equate to? And I guess I'm, as I hear you ask about what's healthy, that's where I fall into. It was like, if I didn't have that moment where I went from, because originally I was just like, man, this guy is just so giving and so sweet. And the only time he gets irritated with me is when I won't do the love language of acts of service. Cause I was like, I'm not that person. But he wants me to move in, and it would have been an extremely isolating situation in DC. Very, I'd probably still have contact with family. But anyway, back on the topic of altruism and like what people want out of a situation, I guess getting clear on your motives and then the motives of other people is the only way to move through. I guess it's not our people baseline good. It's like, is their behavior good at a baseline?
Yeah, and I think we also have to look at the real nut of what you're talking about, and that's communication. Mm-hmm. And honest, forthright communication. And their challenge is, number one, there are angels out there. There really are people out there that their goal is, you know what, I just love you and I just want to take care of you and help you through this crisis. I want to be there for you. I don't need anything back. So you shouldn't be giving them the side eye all the time. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. If somebody is genuinely being kind to you, that's fine. That's good. And I'm not trying to shit all over that or anything. That's very good. But what I am saying is that it's if you really know somebody, it's not that hard to examine what motives they may or may not have.
Right.
and to do it from a kind perspective. And it could also be as simple as having a conversation that says, you have done so much for me that I've got to be honest, it's starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable that I feel like I don't have anything to offer you in return. Can you tell me, what are you getting? What's filling you up when you're giving me this? Because I want to make absolutely sure that you are coming off balanced for what you're giving to me and what you're providing for me. And I know that we've all been in situations where we've done for people without expectation of return, but that just goes on, and then we just don't get anything back. Shit. Or you start to feel like that person is just not appreciative of what you're doing, and they come back to you and say, hey, I know that you lent me $1,000 a year ago, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to pay that back, but my light bill's coming due. Can I get another 300?
Yeah.
And you're just like,
Again.
yeah. And so I really think that we should allow people to do for us. We should allow people to help us. But especially if we're in need, like my mother used to say, smile and say thank you. Okay, I can do that. I can smile and say thank you. But we also need to look to communicate with that person about what that looks like. And if we, for instance, let's say that somebody loans you money and you have committed to pay them back, don't make them come looking for it when you're overdue. Be on top of that. And so to me, that's a baseline goodness. It really comes down to expectations and communications and those being in sync with everybody around you. Because if we're mirroring, part of what that means, there's a psychological expression. I cannot remember what it's called. It might even be called mirroring, where in lovemaking, we do to our partner what we would like for them to do to us. We touch them in the way that we would like to be touched. And sometimes they will even say, I don't like when you do that. But we feel like, well, it feels good to me, so you should like it when I twist your nipples, Come on, if I do it enough times, you'll start to like it.
Yeah.
And so, we try to almost inflict on other people what we like, even if they don't like it.
Yeah.
And so again, communication and really being considerate with our mirroring. Read the room. Read the room. And so on that baseline goodness, I would consider baseline goodness to be a contract, an unspoken social contract amongst any group of people with similar goals and similar day-to-day experiences, who support one another and accept support in return, and who have a basic understanding of what helps them to feel closest to their higher self in their behavior.
There's this
consensus.
There's this thing that comes to mind as you're talking about how we and I've done this. So when someone gives to you, and then or you give, and then someone says, oh, well, how can I pay you back? And you're like, oh, no, don't worry about it. And a need for a change in the dynamic. Like there can be one or two things that can be given in exchange, like how it's almost like a pushback on it. For me, it's always been that cheapens the giving, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like there's an opportunity to reevaluate that mindset, to say, oh, well, no, it just creates balance. It's something that a conversation, like you said, communication comes into key here, where you communicate what you're doing equates to that exchange. And you brought this up when you were talking about exchanges within our bio-universal class. You were like, we need to talk about the energetic exchange. You can't just bring muffins and and it wasn't in any sort of harsh tone, but it made absolute sense. if what you are exchanging does not provide value, or like I've had people approach me and they say, hey, can I exchange this with you and you sell it? And I'm like, no, because that doesn't, now I'm putting in the work to sell it, to now the exchange is
It's skewed.
unbalanced again. And why can't you sell it? Kind of thing. Like, if you're having trouble, what makes you think I'll be different? But I think that conversation is entirely necessary, because our value system, which plays right into baseline of goodness, is different person to person, individual to individual.
Right. And I'm the first to say there's a huge, huge difference between creating balance, energy in, energy out, versus scorekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And I just know, I'm not saying you should have an audit book and you should keep very close tabs on who has paid you back and who hasn't. It's not like that. It's about a feeling. And we all know about feelings where we've been in relationships with partners or relatives or even children, where we feel like I'm not getting enough back for what I'm pouring into this, whether it's a dynamic you established or routine established or whatever it might be. I do not feel like I am rewarded enough for what I'm putting up with in this relationship. And I would say let's go 18 and over on on our right to feel that way. But I mean, sometimes it's a brother or a sister-in-law or a mom or a dad where we're saying, this is just too heavy of a burden for me to carry. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
either going to need some help to labor divide, or I got a jet. I'm going to have to cut and go. And so we look at that and say, oh, Carolyn is just not a good person. She left her elderly mother high and dry in a nursing facility, or maybe Carolyn was exhausted and needed help.
Right, because her mom was an absolute narcissist or something
Or,
like
or
that.
mom, is having dementia and it's psychotic dementia. So it's violent,
Mm,
or, it's not within her skill set to manage it.
right.
There's a lot of ways that goodness, or the definition of goodness, becomes offset. But and the bottom line is we don't really know anybody's situation and what they're experiencing. My ability to give is greatly relative to what's happening in my life.
Yes.
And honestly, my son, who is now 41, does not speak to me because he was angry with me about something. He wanted to talk to me about it in that moment. I was having a crisis that week of my own. And I said,
Mm,
I want to talk to you about this. I want to give you my attention on it. I cannot right now today do that. I'm not in a place to handle that. And boy, he was offended and boom.
gone.
He took his anger and he went home. So, that's sometimes the outcome. And I love him and I feel for him and I'm sorry that he hurts. I mean, there's a lot more involved with it than just that.
Sure.
But that was the real breakdown of it that I felt. And so yeah, it's a matter of what can you stay behind and support and what can you not, and how does altruism come into play with that? How does balance come into play with that? And how does goodness come into play with that? It's a lot of moving parts there.
A lot of moving parts, as you mentioned: culture, background, belief system, value system, all of which I will stress and die on this hill, should change as you change. Like, nobody stays the same. Nobody. Even if you are the most devout believer in X, Y, and Z, that it changes. It gets more intense, or it settles down, or it does change. And so,
Mhm.
um, our ruling on the question: does baseline human goodness exist?
Sort of.
I was going to say no. Um,
You have no hope at baseline goodness, if you are a mullet and not a waterfall, I can tell you that right now.
You know, I'm intrigued by the diagram you mentioned. So
I'll hook you up.
I won't say which side I'm for, but I love that you went to the creator to
Oh, I
for
didn't
advice.
personally. This is internet
Oh,
fodder.
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know the guy that invented toilet
Of
paper.
course you don't. You said
I'm
you're older
old, but
than
not
me.
that old.
Not that old. But I admire the Virgo level of research. So, something I aspire to. But we are at that time again. This went this I love that our closing like our closing the year out episodes have been about a thoughtfulness, a personalization of the conversation. So as you all watch this, as you watch it on the replay, hopefully you expand into what's true for you and then carry that into 2024. I mean, it's not your personal new year, but this is when we kind of make new considerations and follow cusp to bring those seeds to life in the in the springtime. You don't have to make any changes during the winter, but to sit and to basically, bake in the soil of your own mind and consider what's true for you as far as these topics are concerned. Keep in the comments. We love uh hearing from you all, and that will continue. We've got 5 episodes to number 100. I
Ooh.
know. I if Bram hadn't pointed it out, I would have glossed right over it. I'd have been like, "Oh, 200. There we
You
are."
know, we really should start over at 100 and just go through the whole thing again and let that see how we've evolved on each of the topics.
Yes, as we just discussed the evolution of things. I love that. That's a great idea. Well, we'll catch you next time on Crossroads of Cognizance. Have a great night, everybody.